Welcome back to the Severe Setup, episode 8. This week, we're going to take a look at UFC Apex card. Jargino Rosenstruck versus Shamil Gaziv in the main event. Not that exciting of a main event, perhaps, but not too bad of an undercard. Lots of interesting fights on the undercard here, and we're going to break it down as quickly as we can over the next 30 minutes or so. A little bit of a chit chat towards the end of the podcast. I teased Harry with this before we started recording. I'll tell everybody now, including Harry, a little bit of chit chat about maybe Francis Ngannou's next steps later on this year. That might wrap us out for the Severe Setup this week. We'll spend a couple of minutes of that towards the end, but let's get straight into it in the heavyweight division, Harry. Well, a fight on this card that is somewhat understandable for an Apex card. We've seen this kind of being showcased before. It's more of a showcase, I would think, for Shamil Gaziv versus who's going in there against Jairzinho Rosenstruck, undefeated. Saw him competing in December, I believe, on the Edwards Covington card against Martin Budai on the undercard. A good performance there, looking to kind of create some fresh meat in the heavyweight division, but not that exciting of a fight, really, Harry, for the main event.
Look, my thing here is, how do we go from Martin Budai on your first UFC performance to then Jairzinho Rosenstruck? How do we do that? I understand that, you know, the heavyweight division is a little bit loose, shall we say? It's a little bit top heavy. It's a little bit in and around, but I don't understand why or how Shamil Gadziev, who, okay, he's 34, and so I get that if we're going to do it, we've got to do it, but Martin Budai is somebody who's, you know, probably fighting for his UFC contract sooner rather than later. And he goes from him to Jairzinho Rosenstruck. Like, I just, the meritocracy part of me, the sporting part of me just does not like that sort of a jump. But look, I get it. I understand it. They want to do two big heavyweights as the main event. Personally, I think the main event should have been Alex Perez versus Muhammad Mokaev, but that's just my thoughts on it. I understand that the UFC think that it's harder to sell the flyweight main events than it is to sell two big meaty men doing two big meaty men things.
But it's like, should they care about what they're willing to sell or whether they're not willing to sell? Because it's like when you're putting on cards like this in the Apex, it gives me the opinion, it gives all the fans the opinion, and everyone is at the stage now where they don't really give a crap about what product that they dish out on this. And it's like, maybe I don't know, maybe they feel that the heavyweights attract more of a casual audience, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's at the top of this card, because the UFC is still getting the same payment. It's still generating the same money, and the only difference that the main event will maybe play a factor in is like what their peak viewing audience is going to be when anybody tunes in. And maybe, you know, that's what they've found with the standard audience, that they do prefer watch the two big guys go at it rather than two guys in Alex Perez and Muhammad Mokaev, who legitimately could be in a shot with a shot at getting a title shot here. And I mean, okay, you want to give the argument I just gave, and I'll play devil's advocate on myself, is that, well, what's a better way to promote the next number one contender at 125 pounds as well? You put them at the top of a card like this, and you give them the spotlight, and you give them 5 rounds to work with as well, in order to kind of prove that they're next in line for the flyweight title. So, I mean, I definitely see where you're coming from here. When this fight card got announced and the undercard wasn't really announced, I was almost thinking about, like, I ain't fucking watching this at all. But I definitely am, because what we are going to concentrate on is the fights that are on the undercard, and there is a couple of decent fights on the undercard as well, Harry. In your co-main event, Vitor Petrino versus Tyson Pedro, undefeated Vitor Petrino coming in against the heavy hitter Tyson Pedro. I was massively impressed by Petrino in his last fight against Modestas Bukauskas. Absolutely murked him on the feet. Looked so powerful. Looked like he had bags of cardio. Looked decent enough in the grappling exchanges. And I was like, I can't wait to see this guy progress up there at 10-0 coming in against Tyson Pedro. It's actually a very well matched fight in the co-main event. Would you agree?
I would agree. I think Tyson Pedro is the right test at the right time. Petrino, we know clearly he has power and he's got a bit of cardio. Tyson Pedro can do a bit of the grappling, a bit of the MMA grappling, but he can also do a bit of the hitting. I think the other side of this Tyson Pedro is in recent fights, he's had an air of the Jimmy Crute about him, where if he comes in and he looks great, that's a really tough fight for Vitor Petrino. If he comes in and he looks a shell of himself, then Petrino will probably get him out there in the first round. And so, for the UFC, it's kind of a win-win, as it always is for the UFC. If Petrino goes out and just starches a really good version of Tyson Pedro, they know exactly what they have on their hands. If Petrino goes out against a really good Tyson Pedro and has a tough fight, they equally know that they can maybe build him a little bit slower. And for the same vein, if Petrino goes out against a poor Tyson Pedro and just demolishes him, well, then they've got a highlight reel. You know what I mean?
If you care to speculate on this fight, how would you feel it was going to go down?
Petrino inside too?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think I got that vibe from him based off, Modestas Bukauskas is no easy out. Very good fighter, a fighter that was kind of reborn somewhat after coming back to the UFC on a good run too, and did get taken out with relative ease. So I'm very, very excited. If you're not excited about the main event, be excited about the co-main event, and definitely be excited about the next fight as well. And that's Alex Perez versus Muhammad Mokaev. I feel that we're going to spend a little bit of time on this one. We're finally at the final stages of the march up the rankings for Muhammad Mokaev, Harry. It hasn't been all easy for him. It hasn't been all one-sided for him. He's had to deal with injuries. He's had to come back from scares in fights against last-minute opponents. He got the win over the veteran in the last time in Tim Elliott. Now that being said, it hasn't been all easy. He's finished 4 of his 5 fights within the UFC, and the only fight that he has went to decision with is Charles Johnson, and we're very high on Charles Johnson here. We've talked him up, and he's a tough customer to get out of there. He comes in against Alex Perez, a Perez that is coming off of a loss over Alejandro Pantoja, a fight that was that sealed Pantoja's #1 status. But you would be amazed if you look back at the Topology or Sherdog page of Alex Perez. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 fights since 2020 been scrapped on Alex Perez's calendar. Crazy turn of events, and he's back. He's against Mokaev. What's your feelings heading into this fight about how two of these fighters, Harry?
I think the UFC know what they're doing here. I think that Perez isn't a massive hitter. I think he's susceptible to be submitted, and he's got a great gas tank, and so he'll be able to go for those 3 rounds. Mokaev will go for those 3 rounds, but Perez has got that veteran savvy where he's coming towards the end of his career, right? We know exactly what the ceiling is for Alex Perez, which is very, very, very good fighter, but he's not going to be winning titles, right? We've seen already what happens when he fights the elite of the elite, and that's that he just comes up short, and that's fine, right? You have to have these people in and around divisions. But they have picked somebody in Alex Perez, which is a very winnable fight for Muhammad Mokaev. I think Muhammad Mokaev's relentless wrestling and relentless grappling will open up opportunities for him. But the real question for me is, what does the striking exchanges look like? Because Alex Perez has some good fundamental boxing for MMA. Muhammad Mokaev loves kicks, as we know. That's one of the big parts of his game, because he's so confident of being able to wrestle out of any kicks that are being caught, or back body locks if kicks do get caught, etc., etc. And then, yeah, I'm high on this fight. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. This one to me has an underlying air of, this is your IQ test at the higher level for Muhammad Mokaev, because the UFC know that Mokaev is obviously very skilled, obviously very talented, but even against Tim Elliott, right? There were moments where things got a little sketchy, right? And they weren't perfect. And we have seen him be in deep submissions before and either just got them and just take the damage, or refuse to tap and have to fight his way out and then get to finishes himself. And so I think for Alex Perez, the aim is clear, and it's to expose the immaturity in Muhammad Mokaev's game. For Muhammad Mokaev, the answer is simple. It doesn't really matter if he takes Alex Perez to a decision. We need to see a complete performance from him.
You know, you mentioned immaturity there, and that's a good word in Muhammad Mokhayev's game. Another word that would pop to me is a little bit of patience as well. It seems to kind of want to rush things a little bit too much and kind of gets himself into sticky situations because of that. Would you be pointing out those two factors as some of the things that he has to change coming in against, like, because these are the type of fights that he's going to be in against for many years to come now. There ain't no downward steps with Muhammad Mokhayев unless it's a massive fall from grace from him, but I personally can't see that. We're talking about a fighter that's still very young in his career, 23 years of age, still has a chance to break John Jones's record as well. If he wins this fight against Alex Perez and they put him in there against Alejandro Pantoja, he has a chance to win that title in, I think, lesser time than what John Jones did. But I mean, there's a lot of moving blocks. There's a lot of hurdles in the way before we even get to that. And talking about that, Harry, back to my original question. You know, what are some of the main aspects that you would like to see Mo change up in his game in order to kind of be able to compete against this level of opponent?
So one of the things that I would love to see Muhammad start to implement is a grappling style that aims to drown his opponents, right? Something that we don't see enough from him, even though I do think it is something that is in his locker, is a continual sort of removal of posts and frames. He's too happy to scramble. He's too happy to get to good positions and then jump on a submission a little bit too early, which speaks to the patience point that you've already made. And he's too willing, I think, to just hunker down in positions and then wait for something to happen and then start doing things, right? I would prefer that he has this progressive style whereby damage is the priority always, positional control secondarily. And understand that flyweight, it's very hard to pin these guys. They're very, very mobile. They're very agile. It's very, very hard to hold them down. But I would like to see Mokaev start to bring that sort of style into that suffocating, smothering style where he doesn't have to find something immediately. Like, I think when we look at Mokaev and we look at sort of where that style that he has could take him, and we look at somebody like Pantoja, let's say he's fighting Pantoja. Pantoja is a Tasmanian devil. And what's the antidote to a Tasmanian devil? Well, it's pinning and it's control, right? And you are supposed to be, if you're Muhammad Mokaev, continually looking up at the likes of Alexander Pantoja, as he is the guy you have your sights on eventually. Of course, we're not overlooking Alex Perez. And so if we come out here and Muhammad Mokaev is able to put on a patient and sort of noteworthy performance, then it actually allows him, if he jumps on that microphone, because this is where we're getting to now, right? Now, it doesn't matter if he just wins. Now he has to win with style. Otherwise, when he jumps on that microphone, he's not going to have anything to say other than, Pantoja, you've fought everyone already. Why don't you give me a crack? You know? And Pantoja will look at that and say, okay, what for? You know, he has to give something. And in the era that we're in the UFC, it's not necessarily about the meritocracy. It's about the what have you done for me lately thing. And so if Mokaev goes out there, has a great 2 rounds and finishes Perez in the third, well, then he can jump on that mic and say, that's 6 finishes in 5 fights. Give me that fucking guy. You know?
Yeah, 100%. Very well said. Very well broken down. And I would agree with absolutely everything that you said there. Look at another 2 guys in the 125 division take up another slot on the main card. And the guy you mentioned on the balance breakdown that has a real chance to kind of make a drive forward in the 125-pound division. And that's Steve Erceg against Matt Schnell. This is going to be a great fight. You know, Matt Schnell always brings the heat. I think Erceg really technical striker here, and I'm excited to see what he does against a guy with the caliber of Matt Schnell.
I think this is a coming out party for Steve Erceg, frankly. I feel like Matt Schnell's too wild, he's too chinny, and Steve Erceg is just going to pick him apart. I feel like this, I know that we've only just recorded and just released the balance breakdown. This to me is the 125-pound version of Daniel Zellhuber versus Francisco Prado, where Schnell is Prado and Zellhuber is Erceg, where over time. And I think Steve Erceg is a far better fighter than Daniel Zellhuber, but it's a similar style where Schnell is going to stick to what he knows and what he thinks is good for his game, which is lots of volume, lots of power, lots of shots, and then get clipped a lot. And if he's not able to adapt that style to something different, Steve Erceg will handily take this.
Yeah, I think that's a fair enough assessment and a good breakdown of that fight as well. And I'm excited to see. I got to see Erceg live in Vancouver, and I like coming in against David Dvorak for your UFC debut, and the way he handled the pressure and the way he performed in that fight, just so smooth, so technical, and really good to look at as well. And I think you're right. I think it's a good stylistic matchup for Schnell. Schnell always dangerous, of course, with those big shots, those big power. And always in exciting fights. So I'm excited to see what happens there. Cousin Umar up next. Umar Nurmagomedov, 16-0 coming in against Beksat Almakan, a UFC newcomer. Now, I know that I think Umar Nurmagomedov has been finding difficulty in finding opponents, Harry, but I don't know. And without knowing too much about his opponent here, but we've got to be doing a little bit better from trying to match him up here. Brian Kelleher, Nate Maness, Honey Barcelos, and now we're at Begsat Almakan, and it seems like a little bit of a step down in competition, really, doesn't it, this one? And he's in a kind of a limbo in the 135-pound division where it doesn't seem anybody is wanting to kind of give him the opportunity to crack on and fire up the rankings in at 135. What do you kind of assess of the whole situation heading in here for Cousin Umar?
It's a weird one. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming anyone for turning down Cousin Umar.
No, either am I.
I'll be turning down Cousin Umar every fucking day and twice on the Sunday. But look, I think we don't know anything. At least I don't know anything about his opponent. He could come in here and beat Cousin Umar and take all that shine, and then we're like, fuck me, where's this guy been our entire life? He's a finisher. He does not like going to decision at all and only taken one loss in his career. Now, we have to look at the organization that he's been fighting in. And so whilst he's been in Octagon, and Octagon are a reputable organization, they don't have a roster as deep as the UFC do. And we know that Cousin Umar has been absolutely fucking running through the 135-pound division, which, as we say all the time, is one of, if not the best division in the UFC right now. In terms of matching Cousin Umar, it feels as though you're absolutely right. Cousin Umar should be fighting a top 5 guy. That's what should be happening right now. And then the winner of Sean O'Malley and/or Chito Vera should be looking at possibly a Cousin Umar immediately after. If not, Cousin Umar is then chucked into a number 1 contenders fight with whoever it is, and we are where we are. And so I think he's going to go in here, and providing that this fella isn't an absolute fucking world beater, Cousin Umar will beat him up for as long as he wants to and then finish him. And then he's going to get on the mic and he's going to say, well, I'm not going to be fighting for a little while because it's Ramadan. And so after Ramadan, find me a guy, and the title picture will have moved on, and maybe there's some more room for him there. But we need to get moving with Cousin Umar. We really, really, really do. And we do because he's 28 years of age. And so if he is going to win a title, let's have him fight for that title pretty fucking soon. And as soon as he's fought for it, if he wins it, great. Let's have the Cousin Umar reign before he's 32 and before we've wasted a prime of a really, really excellent fighter. And if he's not an excellent fighter and he's not good enough to beat it and cut it at the top level, well, can we just find out, please? That would be great.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I'm not calling Almakan a scrub here. He's coming in at 17-1 and has picked up wins against legit opponents coming in here. And I think, what Umar is going to get is he's going to be fighting a decent young fighter here too, but he's not going to get the credit. It's like, it's a no-win situation for him, because if he comes in and he knocks this guy out early or finishes him early, he was like, oh, well, of course he should have done that. It's a UFC debutant. If he goes on and does have a tough fight with this guy, people are going to be saying, oh, he's not what he is because, he's fighting this relatively unknown guy. And I'm frustrated with Umar Nurmagomedov's situation, because I do agree with you. I feel like he should be fighting higher level opposition, and hopefully after this fight we can see it happening. An unconfirmed main card bout for this card. Obviously, Rahul Rosas Jr. fell ill on the balance, or I was going to say we forgot to mention it on the balance breakdown. For UFC Mexico City, was unable to compete against Ricky Turcios. That fight is an unconfirmed rumor for this card. I'm not even going to waste the time talking about this. We'll talk about it on the balance breakdown if it actually happens. I think Ricky Turcios came out today and said that nothing has been signed. It's not official yet. So we'll wait and see what happens. We'll break that fight down if it does happen on the balance breakdown next week. In the middleweight division, Eric Anders versus Jamie Pickett is a fight that's happening in the 185-pound division.
Absolutely horrid fight that is. Horrid.
I was waiting for you. I didn't know whether you're going to give the wave of death there, but I know that's Harry's thoughts on that fight. I can't disagree either. But I know a fight that you don't think is hard, and that's the next one we're going to stop at 135. Harry, Javid Basharat, Eamon Zabi, two of your boys going at it at 135. This is a barn burner on the undercard of this event, and Jesus, talk about a fight that deserves a crowd. This fight deserves a crowd.
I agree. Look, I think I'm gonna say something, and then let me get there. Right. I think that the Basharat brothers are the 2024 version of Ayman Sahabi. And what I mean by that is Ayman is very well rounded. His striking is decent. It's crisp. It's clean. He's got some nice Thai elements. He's got some nice kickboxing elements. He's got some nice fundamental boxing elements. But he also has, as we know, a good ground game, good ability to scramble. And he's just well rounded everywhere. And I think the Basharat brothers, specifically Javid in this fight, he has shown in his performances so far in the UFC an equal well-roundedness across the piece. And then so we're looking here, I think, at a name for the UFC to really find where Javid is. Is Javid going to be the brother that's pushed higher than the other one? Well, we're going to find out because we've got a name here, and the name in Ayman Zahabi means something for a number of reasons. One, he's a veteran of the UFC. Two, whether we like it or not, the fact that his brother is Firas Zahabi means something. His ties to GSP and other fighters are important to the legacy of MMA. And so I think that when we look at Ayman Zahabi, when we look at Javid Basharat, we are going to find two very, very similar styles. And I am so interested to see specifically where both fighters are going to be game planning to get the win over the other. I think it's a fantastic fight.
Who are you leaning on? Who are you leaning in for on this fight, Harry? Yeah, I would be leaning on Javid here as well. I would think that Zabi does have the slight advantage on the feet in technical savvy, but I think that Javid Basharat is going to be more dangerous on the inside in the clinch and taking this fight down. And I'm very, very excited to see what happens on this one. This is one definitely that's worth tuning in early for. Second fight on the card, Lok Rajabov versus Abdul Karim Al Sawadi in the lightweight division. Abdul Karim Al Sawadi coming off of that Contender Series win over George Hardwick. That's where you will remember that name. Coming in against a Lok Rajabov that has a good few fights in the UFC, and this is a spicy enough old debut for Al Sawadi. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. We got to stop on the opening fight of the night. If a lot of hate online for this card, but I think it's more so, they say the cherry is on the top of the cake sometimes, but it's kind of like the shit is on top of the cake for this one, to be honest, with the main event, because I think it takes away for how good this card is. And we have Christian Leroy Duncan, who's opening up this card in the middleweight division against Claudio Ribeiro. Very excited to see CLD in action again. Big fan of him. Obviously, Shawnee, a big fan of him as well. Coming off that brilliant win over Dennis Tululin in his last fight, coming in against another Brazilian here in Claudio Ribeiro, and another winnable fight here for CLD. Wouldn't you agree?
Definitely, yeah. I like what they're doing with Christian Leroy Duncan. I think it's very smart of what they're doing.
Agreed.
But I also think this is one where Christian Leroy Duncan needs to realize that it is a fight that the UFC are giving him because they don't yet trust him. Right. And so if you're Christian Leroy Duncan, you have to take this fight for what it is, and you have to go out and blow Claudio Ribeiro out of the water. And I think if all goes well for Christian Leroy Duncan, he will do exactly that. But this is a fight where he takes it very, 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 very sensible and very, very serious. And he goes out and does a job. No messing, no fucking around. Just go out, finish this fella, and then we move on.
100%, very well said. That breaks us down for the UFC card this weekend in the Apex. Before we move on, just real quickly to talk about Francis, couple of notes. Joel Alvarez, Ludovic Klein off the card. Alvarez was forced to draw to withdraw from that fight. That's a shame. That was a great fight on paper. I saw Yanis Kamori on this card. Obviously, we know Yanis Kamori is the guy who was originally supposed to fight Kalen Loughran on his UFC debut. Could not make weight for that. We heard Kalen Loughran on Twitter absolutely blown away that Yanis Kamori was booked at 135. That fight is now off as well. Kamori withdrew. No excuse here on why he withdrew, but it seemed very, very unusual that he was rebooked at 135 after basically flat out saying, no, I ain't fighting at 135 for my debut because I can't make that weight. Pulled out again, and that the UFC isn't going to kind of like that carry on anyway. But anyway, that's a story for another day. And look, we're going on a little bit longer than we would have thought for that card. So I think we'll spend a little bit of time at this. I think this might be an appetizer for. I'd love to hear yourself and Sean do a speaker's corner on this actual topic. And my exact question for you, Harry, is that will Francis Ngannou fight in mixed martial arts ever again?
No, I don't think so.
Why not?
I don't think so because I think he has a solid chance at having a similar performance against Anthony Joshua as he did against Tyson Fury. I don't think that necessarily means that he immediately gets chucked into something crazy or something big or whatever in the boxing world. But I do think that going out and putting on a performance like he has against those two gentlemen really, really, really means something in terms of his stock in the boxing world. And then I think, why would he go back? Why would he go back to a sport where, okay, I understand the PFL are paying him supposedly very, very good money and stakes in the company and this and that and the next thing. But if I'm Francis Ngannou, I'm going to go and I will fight Anthony Joshua. Maybe I get a rematch with Tyson Fury. Maybe I get an Alexander Usyk type performance. Maybe I get, in Deontay Wilder or whatever. And in those three fights, I might make 30 million, 35 million, 40 million, whatever it is. And then, when I'm 38 or whatever it is, 40, if I want to go beat up some random heavyweight scrub, then fine. But Francis Ngannou doesn't really strike me as that kind of man. He strikes me as the kind of man that will do what he needs to do to secure his future and his family, and then he'll find his way out. My only thing that I will caveat that with, though, is he is a man that sticks to his principles. And so if he signed a contract with the PFL and he has signed a contract to fight MMA for the PFL, I would also not be shocked if he went in and just absolutely murdered Helen Fahea.
There was a big missed opportunity after that Henan Fahea knockout, Harry, where Francis Ngannou didn't get in and square off with Fahea. And to me, that was a big red flag. And to me, that's the sole reason why I'm asking this question again. I maybe I'm looking into it too much, but after that fight, he was talking to a sheik or whatever you want to call those gentlemen over there. I believe that's the right terminology. Is it, Harry, a sheik over there? Yeah. And they were mid-conversation and he was like, I don't know, I'm not sure. And I'm like, I'm wondering, is he talking about going in there and fighting Henan Fahea? Is it that mouth-watering clash? Like, I mean, you're going from Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua to Henan Fahea. Now, that Henan Fahea fight is an interesting one as well, and it has some level of risk. And, you know, if you're coming out with that Anthony Joshua fight and you do perform well, I don't think he wins that fight personally. But I think if he goes in there and does enough and does something similar to what he did against Tyson Fury, you can keep that level of intrigue to kind of bring on that Tyson Fury rematch again. You know, you have your Deontay Wilder match, and plus you're making bags and bags and bags of money in a combat sport where you don't have to worry about elbows or you don't have to worry about takedowns, and you're protected by the big gloves, and you know, you have that hype around you and you have that luxury around you as well. It's like all roads to me are leading to Francis Ngannou not fighting mixed martial arts again. And BFL can try and push it as much as they want, and they can try and promote it as much as they want. But, you know, a very common theme in the world of PFL right now is they say one thing and they do another thing. And, you know, we kind of need to see a few receipts now when it comes to PFL and how they're going to be matching up Francis Ngannou. But do you think that the general audience, Harry, buys into that fight between Renan Ferreira and Francis Ngannou, especially after the knockout that you did see on Saturday night from Ferreira?
No, I don't think so. I think, look, when Ngannou first signed the PFL contract, the question was, who's he going to fight? Right. And there was talks of, do they go and get Phil DeFreeze? Do they go and get fucking Rug, or they go and chuck Buchecha in there way too early, or, you know, any of these sorts of types of mad discussions. And then there was Bruno Capelloza. He had a good run. And then it was maybe it's him and whatever. But I don't think there was ever, for the PFL anyway, there was never that blockbuster name that they were going to be able to put him against. And so as he had in his contract an ability for him to go and box as well, he took that opportunity, and no one but Francis Ngannou and his team thought he was going to be able to do what he did against Tyson Fury. And he went and he did it, and fair play to him, and he got paid and everything else. And now he's made a name and a bed for himself in the boxing world. And it almost feels like there's a bit of ego about the boxing community who are saying this fella should not be able to do this. He's not a boxer. He's not this. It's not that. He's a disgrace to the sport. He's this, he's that. And so it feels as though he's galvanized some of those elite level heavyweights to want to go in and want to sort of prove a point that, no, you can't be this, you know, this thug MMA fighter that comes in and you put the big gloves on and you're doing the sweet science thing. No, we'll sort of show you, is what it feels like. And that's amazing for Francis Ngannou, because you could sell that so easily to as many people as you fucking fancy. And that means hundreds, or if not hundreds, but many, many, many millions of dollars straight into that man's bank account, you know?
Yeah, and I can't blame him if he doesn't come back to mixed martial arts. I'd love to see it happen. It breaks my heart that, you know, we're losing a fighter like Francis and in previous times, Connor as well in their prime. And I want to see the best MMA fighters compete at the highest level against the best MMA fighters. But I cannot blame the man for taking the step over, getting that big payday for boxing. Fair juice to him. Gambled on himself. It paid off. But it does make for some grim days ahead if we're expecting to see Francis Ngannou go on big long runs and fight these exciting fights inside of a cage. And that's the nature of the beast that we've created in mixed martial arts, unfortunately, with fighter pay packets, etc. And I'm not sure even the what they were promised about 7 or 6, what was it, 4 or 5, 6 million that they'll promise Francis to come back, and 2 million to his opponent. I don't know, even that, if that's enough to get the big man back, and it'll be interesting to see. That wraps us up this week for the Severe Setup. At BJJ_ Harry Powell is where you'll find that man next to me. At O'Neill MMA is where you'll find me. Enjoy the fights this weekend. We'll chat to you soon. We'll be back for the balance breakdown next week.